Hi, Romain. So is this rightly pronounced your first name? Romain Gricor, right?
Yeah, if you were American, that would be the right way of saying it.
Okay.
If you would say my name in French would be like Romain.
Romain. And the last name?
Yes. Grécourt.
Grécourt. Romain
Yeah,
Grécourt.
it's such a hard name to pronounce for people that are not
Romain
French.
Grécourt. So now I'm French, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you're officially French now.
Yeah, perfect. Because my last name is Bien. You know, it's like I was once several times in France, and once if they find out that my last name is Bien, I was in the gate at the airport. I forgot where it was. It wasn't Paris. It was somewhere else. So they let me first. So they say, okay, then you are the first. You know, your last name is beautiful, Bien, so you can go. So this was a nice experience. Only happened once. You know.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now to more serious stuff. What is your first computer?
What was my first computer?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So my dad got me an Apple II when I was like 8 years old. So he worked at a bank, and they were recycling their old computers, and there was not many computers that they were donating, but they basically organized like a lottery so that they could pick, you know, which employees they would give the Apple IIs to, and then they would pay like a symbolic sum, like I don't know, like 100 francs at the time or something. Yeah. And so just bought an Apple II, and then he just gave it to me for my birthday back then when I was 8.
So nice. So if you still have the Apple II, you could probably sell it right now, and you could retire from the money, right?
I'm not sure that's worth much money, but I think so. We had two, and I think one still works. Yeah. Oh. We were able to like scrap the pieces of one onto the other, and then I checked like maybe a couple of years back, and it still works.
But I think it has to be, you know, it has to be expensive. Yeah, we have to double check that after the show. So yeah. Okay. So what you did with the computer? Okay, with 8, I guess you played games, right?
Yeah. So you know, it was on one of these monochrome screen with the yellow cursors and the big floppy disks, you know, that were flexible, like the 5. I don't know what that is.
5 1/4, exactly.
Yeah. And so I had a couple of games on that computer, and my dad just taught me how to launch them using the command line.
Oh, so you remember the command?
Yeah. Well, I don't remember the exact command, but I remember I was typing a command line to launch the games.
Yeah, I remember my command. It was in ZX Spectrum, which was load. And I think, yeah, and I don't think it was the name of the file because it was tape. I think I had to, either I had to say just load, or I had to know, this is what I was thinking about, you know, the name of the game or whatever program it was. And yeah, there was load and something like seek on something, but seek would be incredible because you will load the entire tape, which I think one side was 45 minutes. So it was not the best option. Okay, so regardless, so you cannot remember the command, but it's not as bad, right? So yeah. Which games were they? You remember a game at least?
Yeah, I do remember a game that was like a Formula 1 type of game where you were playing some kind of racing game. Mm-hmm. I remember the music in the 8-bit speaker was amazing.
Yeah, back then it was amazing actually. So the music was really nice and the games were also nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And okay, when you started, you know, when you wanted to find a little bit more about the command line or programming or DOS, were there a moment in time, or you were forced to know last week to hack something with Java?
Oh. You mean when did I start getting into more like computers per se?
Or computers, or at least, you know, get interest not in gaming, rather doing something else with the computer. There's also, you know, interesting transition.
I see. So when I was in middle school, I had so in France we have this class which is called like technological something.
Okay.
Which back then it was more like using scissors and glue and doing stuff like that.
Okay.
Like and
this class was called technology, and you had to use glue.
Yeah, in the old times, right? And there was an old teacher that didn't want to use the computer, so they were just like taking the dust. And then I just had the chance of getting one of the new teachers that was trying to use these computers, and he tried without much success to teach the class HTML. Wow. And so at that time, I had another computer. It was a Pentium 90 running like Windows 95.
Okay.
But we didn't have internet or anything. We didn't even have like a local network at home. So I just had my computer on Windows, not knowing what to do with it. And when that guy taught HTML to the class, I was basically the only one kind of like to listen. And I was like, oh, that's nice. So I started making basically like offline web 1.0 style, pages with like blinking animated GIFs and all that kind of stuff.
The blink tag is the most important one. And the marquee tag still works. Marquee tag?
Marquee tag?
Yes. You don't know it? HTML marquee tag? It's one of the most important, HTML elements ever. You don't know it?
I ever used that. No.
Yeah, come on. Blink is blinking. This was okay. And marquee was like a ticker, So you could make the font move across the screen and it still works. Actually, I think 2 weeks ago, I was just curious whether it works, and it works in Chrome. And if you Google for marquee tag, you will find that the result on Google, they also now move around, so which is incredible. It's an Easter egg.
Oh, yeah, I just see it. Okay. Yeah, I don't think I ever used that back then. I was really young, so I was just playing, I remember making like some kind of page, and I was putting like the Simpsons on there. And,
I thought you like Facebook. It's how Facebook started,
No, come on.
How young were you back then?
I think I was like 11.
Oh, okay.
11 or 12, something like this.
That's still incredible. Because I mean, back then, if you did something wrong with HTML, there was nothing display on screen, right? So it is not the easiest way to do something with the computer, right?
Yeah, that's true. I also remember that because I picked up on HTML, basically I started really being close to the teacher, and I started giving me tasks in the work he was doing for the middle school. So I started working on the website for the middle school and doing a bunch of things. So I really picked up on that. I did also some JavaScript at the time.
Wow!
But
with 11,
I didn't really know what I was doing because I was just searching for how to do certain things and just copying the entire things, and then. Yeah, I really didn't know what I was doing with JavaScript.
So I probably, on mouse over and on mouse out, right? Were the most important. So back then,
I don't even think I was knowing these things. I was just basically like spending hours and pounding on the stuff until it worked.
Okay.
So I had really zero knowledge of programming at the time.
But you were one of the chief. Well, you were one of the chief hackers of your school, right? What I understand.
Yeah, maybe I was more like the nerd of the school, you would say. I think.
Yeah.
Back then, like computers, people were not interested into that. Like PlayStation was more of a thing, rather than Windows, right? I think it was around like maybe 98.
Okay.
So I think back then, people of my age were not interested in computers at all.
Yeah. This is what I found later. So, simply like back then, I was one of the view crazy guys who was interested in computers. And then, a few years later, because a huge thing, but at that time, no one was interested that much in computers. I actually don't know why, because for me, it was obvious that it was the greatest things ever. But all the others say, okay, it's boring and there is no future. It's okay, it's crazy, no future. I mean, yeah. So we have a little bit future right now, but back then it was like hopeless for the others, and for me it was great. Yeah. Hey, you did this with Netscape Composer and Netscape.
Yes, definitely, because at the time it was the old like modem style, internet connection. So what we had, if you remember, like you were buying CDs from a shop or something, and then you had like a free, 2 hours of connection, with a modem on some kind of provider.
Yeah.
And back then, all these providers, they were kind of shipping their own version of Netscape, right? Where the dial-up was kind of baked in the browser. So I remember we were kind of jumping off from these like discounted offers from various providers in France. So we had like the names are probably not going to ring a bell, but we jumped like for a with probably like a couple of providers for a while. And I was using Netscape at the time. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
I also think that on Windows 95, I think I had the first version of Internet Explorer on it at some point.
Yes. What I remember, it was around 2000. So I got requests from some companies, to create a company branded browser for them. And back then, this is how Icefaces started, actually. They started with Ice Browser. There was a browser written in Java. And you can buy the browser and provide some logos of the company, some look and feel. And it looked like, the company's browser. And then the browser was not commercially successful. And they just picked the technology of the browser and created Java server faces, because Java server faces should be also capable of parse efficiently HTML. This was the short story of ICE faces, ICE browser, and ICE faces.
I see.
Yeah. But this was like, I just remember the ICE browser for unknown reasons. Back to you. So you did you had some, success in the school by without Marquee Tech, just with Blink Tech, right? So which was already
I was more
remarkable.
into making animated GIFs. I remember there was some kind of exercise where we had to explain how the automation of a coffee machine was working.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember doing an animated GIF for that. So I was really more into animation rather than HTML itself.
Yeah, Giphy was sold for millions or billions right now, right? There's a Giphy company, Giphy? There's a startup of you, I don't know, they were sold to another company for millions, and this was a lost opportunity, This is how you start. You could sell, with 14, your GIF engine, and you could retire again.
Yeah. and so...
You did the animated GIF for coffee machine automation, right?
Yes. I remember I found some kind of software where you could just feed multiple images and then you would just compile them into an animated GIF. So I was making the different plans using Paint, and then I was just compiling them into a GIF using some software.
Yeah. Same here. I was very fascinated by animated GIFs. I had no idea how they are working, and then. You had to use specific software exactly back then. There were several options for that.
And so that got me into Flash, basically. And that's really how I started kind of programming.
Okay.
Because I used to love the Flash websites back then because they really were something else.
Yes.
And there was a lot of games written in Flash, and I was really fascinated by the animation that Flash was offering compared to the blinking stuff that we were doing with the JavaScript and the regular stuff. So I asked my mom to buy me a book for Flash.
Mm-hmm. And, was it Macromedia Flash or Adobe Flash?
Yes.
Macromedia, I guess.
Yeah, it was version 4, I think, something like this.
Mm-hmm. What I remember was the Flash. It looked beautiful. The books were beautiful. Flash was beautiful. It looked somehow technical, with nice colors, nice styling. So it was this was the opposite from the black and white HTML stuff usually around, right?
I do remember at the time you could not even make a table where the line was just a pixel. It was always with a bevel. I'm not sure if you remember that.
Yeah.
And you had to make 2 tables and use cell padding 1 so that the tables on the back had some kind of background, and then tables in the front was opaque, and then you would basically be able to show a single line. Back then it was that hard to make something look good. So Flash was really a big thing, I think.
Yeah, it was. I was fascinated by Flash, and I got Flash. I got the software, but I completely was not able to understand what's going on inside Flash. So for me, it was the keyframes and all the lines. I said, okay, what they wanted from me, this was for me, it was a completely different world to JavaScript or Java or C or whatever.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's at that time I was probably 13 or 14, and it's you take a kid that's used to playing Lego, and instead you give him Flash and a book, and it's just gonna, it's just gonna pick it up after a while. So for me, that's what happened.
What you created with Flash back then?
So I was playing hockey, and I was trying hard to make a website for my hockey club. So nice. I did a couple of animation with a puck moving, and the mascot of our club. It was a little bit lame, so it was not very usable. So and back then, the website was not that important. It was just a side note, oh, somebody has a website. But the website, is static and it's never updated because at least there was no backend, right? Mm-hmm. Back then, there was this kind of, there was a lot of offering for static content websites. Mm-hmm. So I was just hosting it on one of these things, and it was full of iframes and pop-ups, obviously. So it was not really nice.
No more animated GIFs, just Flash. And by the way, what I think what you did is no progress bar. Here is loading and skip intro, right? This was the thing back then.
Yeah. Well, except that my animation wasn't as long, so I didn't really need to do that. But
but back then
did it just because everybody was
You wanted to do this regardless whether it was long or not. The progress bar page is loading, and then you can skip the intro. There was an intro, and then you got the content. This was very fashionable back then.
Yes.
And so, what else you did with Flash? Since I'm interesting. So
So at the end of middle school in France, you have some kind of exam, and you also should have some kind of internship. It's not. I don't think it's mandatory, but everybody does it. So I did an internship through my teacher because he was friends with like a local computer shop.
Was the same teacher he gave you? Okay. Mm-hmm.
So he got me in touch with his friends at the computer shop, and I got an internship there, and I basically kind of redid their website in Flash.
Mm-hmm.
I think the website looked good as I remember it, but it was not fully functional for them. So I don't really think they put it online for too long. I think it was probably online for a year. But nevertheless, like during 4 weeks or something, I kind of redid their entire website.
Mm-hmm.
That was nice, and I got paid because at the end they gave me like computer parts for me to build my computer. So I had like a nice graphic card and a discount on like the hard drive and a few things. So that was really nice.
Yeah, this is incredible. So for a young guy, if you get all this stuff, so this is a huge.
And back then that was really expensive, so I was really happy.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I didn't have the money to kind of finish the computer, so I had to ask my dad to like help me for the finances. But so I was able to get like a nice computer back then. I think it was like a GeForce Titanium.
Okay.
And it was, what was it? It was a AMD K6 500 megahertz or something. It was probably like
this K6 was also my machine, but it was 266 or so, this K3 or K6. So
AMD's, you had the previous generation, I think.
Yeah. I had a lots of AMDs back then. They were a little bit
They were cheaper.
Hot, but they went hot and they consume more power. And there came the Intel Duo or whatever. And now I'm running Xeons, the low power on my servers. But I'm going back to AMDs right now because they're nicer. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're nice and cheap and powerful.
Hey, and what you did was so you assembled the machine from the parts. Were you able to do it?
Yes.
And what
so
did it work from the beginning, or were there some problems? Okay.
No. We were able, and back then it was funny because you had to put a couple of switches on the motherboards just to set up the board to say, okay, this type of processor, you were adjusting like the frequencies and the voltages, on the board itself using some pins. So you had to really read the book from the motherboard to kind of set it up. So it wasn't easy. I think we took like almost a day to assemble a computer, if I remember.
Okay. Yeah,
but it worked. I didn't have much problem with it, except that I think I overclocked it a little bit, and so sometimes the computer would reset.
Okay, so you overclocked it on purpose, or it wasn't?
Yeah, just because I wanted to switch faster.
Yeah, so right now I also recently, I would say 1 year ago, also I'm rebuilding my servers every 2 to 3 years. And still you have to read the manual because, different options, and if something goes wrong, you have to know. Then the motherboard beeps, and you have to find out what the beeps actually meaning, what went wrong, and still fun. Not that different to back then, I would say.
Well, except that you don't really have to put so many switches on the board when you plug the CPU and all these other pieces, right?
This is true, but you have to do, the work before. So what I usually do, I pick, the CPU and I see which motherboards are supported. If you have the motherboard, which, RAM is supported, and then usually it works, right?
Yeah, I agree. That's the hard part.
Yeah. But then if you have the right parts, which sometimes you don't get them, but if you have them, it usually can work smoothly. Recently, actually, I revamped an old server. And what's happened was the cooling glue between the CPU and the cooling fan was old and didn't work properly. And what happened is the computer became incredibly slow, and I had no idea why. And this was actually the reason. That was amazing that it works that well. So and then I just replaced this is called like I don't know what the proper name is. It looks like grease, and this is the
the thermal paste.
Yeah, the thermal paste, exactly. The thermal paste, it was old, and now I replaced the thermal paste, and now it works perfectly. So this was interesting because I suspected something else, and this was actually the issue. So,
yeah.
It
could have been way worse than just the computer getting slower.
Yeah, this is what I know.
Sometimes you could even break the PCs, yeah. So.
But I don't think so, because there are thermal protection, right? Usually in the CPU, they will just, scale down, become automatically slower, right? If they are too hot. I think all CPUs right now.
Yeah, you might be right. Yeah.
Okay, nice. So this was your excursion, to hardware. So how to build proper hardware with 13 and then 20 years later, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what you did with the machine? You have a beefy GPU card. I think you can just write HTML faster than with the machine, right? Or what you did with it?
Yeah, so back then, since I was a teenager, I was really into video games, obviously, right?
Of course, yeah.
And at the time, I was into computers, but not that much into computers.
Mm-hmm.
And so around that time, like Half-Life was released,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a huge kind of wave of goodness with all the local kind of how do you call that? Computer clubs, like, you know, these shops where you go and you can play video games with friends. I forgot how that was called, like network cafes, basically.
Yes.
And there was a lot of them popping up in the city, and then you could compete with other people on the game. And since I'm a really big competitor, then I started playing the game a lot because I wanted to be the best, right?
So this is
really
where they were called LAN parties in Germany, because you had to bring, you know, the computer, and they were wired, so they created their own, you know, network with own switches, and you could play against each other. This is what you mean, right?
Right, yeah. And back then there was no DSL connection for anybody. So,
exactly.
So I remember, like, these things were expensive back then. It was like 10 francs for an hour. And so since I didn't want to ask a lot of money to my parents, I wasn't playing much, but I had a computer at home that I could play the game with. So I started playing, you know, with bots in the computer just to kind of train before I would go there with my friends.
Okay, and how good you became back then? Now it's called esports, right? It's like sports without moving, right? Mm-hmm.
So it's a long story, but I really went deep and far in the game. So I played that game for a long time, and then I found a local team that we were competing with all the way up to the national level.
Wow.
Up until high school. So I got really good at the game. That's the bottom line.
What was it? Chess?
No, Counter-Strike.
Counter-Strike, okay. It's a nice, peaceful game, right? This is like about, about, you know, social behavior and soft skills, right? This is what I think about. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But there is a nice story to it, though. It's so I have an older brother that wasn't really that much into computer, but since my dad was worried that there would be like jealousy that I had a computer in my bedroom and the brother didn't have one, then he wanted the two brothers to kind of be on par. So he bought him a computer that he found like on discount. Mm-hmm. And so back then my dad had his own computer, but he was the only one to have like a modem plugged to the computer. So he was like, if you wanted internet, you had to go on his computer, and there was no kind of switches available in the market. So what we had at home was like a hub, and my dad wired like holes through all the ceilings, and we had like a LAN network, right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
With all the computers.
Yes.
So I could invite my friends over and could play some kind of games offline, but we didn't have internet like shared among the computers.
Okay.
So since I really wanted to play the game online against real people, what I did is I stole the modem card from my brother's computer, and I plugged it into my own computer. And then I wired a phone cable from my dad's office into my own computer, and I was connecting on the internet without anybody knowing.
Wow. And your dad is not listening right now, right?
No, it's fine. He knows about this.
Okay.
So what was fun is, like, back then there was a phone provider that's called Free in France, which is it's one of the top ones. And what they had special was that you didn't have to pay a plan to get like a fixed number of hours. What you had was you were paying the national rate for a regular phone call, and you could get on the internet as long as you like. So that was great. So basically I was on internet like most of the time.
Okay.
The problem is nobody could phone home because I was always on the phone, right? And so my dad found that when my grandpa was trying to call us, and he would never be able to reach us. So someday when he was able to get my dad on the phone, he said, "What's going on at your place? Like, it's always busy." And so that's when my dad kind of ticked off, and he asked the phone company for like the listing of the phone calls, right? And that's how we figured out that I basically, and then he looked at my computer, it was like, "Oh, naughty boy." So that's how I got caught. But so that's a nice story.
How was the conversation between your dad and you after, the findings? Was it a nice one?
Yeah. My dad was rather amused and impressed.
Okay. Great. And your brother?
My mom was not so much impressed though, but my dad was impressed. Yeah.
Very good. And your brother is stronger than you back then?
Yeah, he's 4 years older. Yeah.
Oh, this was actually dangerous, tactics, what you did, stealing cards from his computer, right?
Yeah. I didn't tell him.
Okay. So he was not that interested in computers, what I found out, because usually we'll find out, right?
And so what's interesting also about this is that back then when you wanted to compete with other people on Counter-Strike and other games like Quake, and if you were a team and you needed to find like opponents, there was a need for like being on some kind of network and ask for people who wants to play with us, right? And so back then, people were using IRC on a server called QuakeNet.
Okay.
And so I didn't know anything about IRC, but I just remember that once I was asking somebody in the game, where can I find people to play against? And he told me IRC on QuakeNet. And I just basically searched hard on that on the old Google or whatever. And I found like the MIRC software, and I managed to connect on the server. One problem is that QuakeNet, the way it works is the first one to join a channel is admin, right? And then you can make other people admin. But if the channel has nobody on it, then the next first person that joins the channel becomes admin.
Okay.
Which means that when you turn off your computer, the next day you don't know if that channel is going to be yours.
Okay.
So they have a mechanism where if you have 4 people for like 5 hours, a special bot from the server is going to come into the channel. And then you can authenticate yourself against this bot so that whenever you come back, it's going to make you admin. Okay. That was the way basically how you establish like your own channel back then. And I remember working really hard to understand how this stuff was working because, I mean, there was no documentation or nobody helping me. And I did set up like IRC on like 5 computers at home. I mean, we had a lot of computers. And I was able to kind of get the bot to come. And then I taught all my team like how to use MIRC and how to basically connect to the channel, how to get your identity. And then we got going from there because we were able to kind of be a team on the IRC server and kind of look for games. So that's what really basically got me into like more tinkering with my computers because I remember I probably spent the whole week doing that. And that was really funny. And that's really what got me more into the kind of the tinkering side of computers. Because on IRC and MIRC, there's a lot of scripting also that you can do and a lot of kind of commands. So that's basically how I really got started with, I would say, with programming.
And this already looks almost like terminal, right? So if you look at the IRC channel, it's a very low level actually.
Yes.
And you won something with the Counter-Strike, or I mean,
we won a couple of tournaments. So back then it was, I think the year we were really good. The league was sponsored by Intel, and we were trying really hard to get enough points to go to the national, like the finals, final championship. And I think we won probably like 4 local tournaments. Each tournament had probably like 300 or 400 players. So they were like kind of big tournaments.
Wow. Okay.
And we made sure to select the ones where like bigger names were not coming so that we had higher chances of winning the tournaments because obviously we're not the best, right?
Okay.
And we knew that if the top 3 teams were at the tournament, we had no chances of kind of getting on the podium and getting the points we needed to get onto like the top 16 because only the top 16 were getting over there. It's too bad. I think I just recently disconnected my membership for the website that I had for the team, so it's not online anymore.
Oh,
no, it's not.
And you could win something reasonable, like hardware from Intel or computer or whatever.
Yeah. So the highest prize we got back then was, I think, some kind of, we had an Intel CPU each and some kind of check. I think it was like probably 200 euros each, one CPU and then one game or something.
Nice.
So yeah, if you were selling like all the stuff on the spot to other people, you could make probably like 400 euros per person.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean, something. How old were you? 15, 16?
I was in high school, so I was probably like 17 or 18.
Okay. So still nice. I mean, what I tried once, I think it was Quake. I tried to play over internet, but my internet connection was too slow. And what I remember is that everyone moved a lot faster than I was moving. I had absolutely no chance.
Yeah.
So somehow I don't know, back then, this is what I remember right now. You told me about so I tried, I had a really bad connection, like it was an analog connection, not even DSL. And the others probably had played in LAN or whatever. But what I saw is they moved incredibly fast for me and I was immediately killed. So I don't know which game it was, but this was what I tried. And for me, it was very expensive to go online back then because I had different contract. It was, you had to pay by minute or something. It was strange.
Yeah, and plus Quake is probably the most technical first-person shooter game you could think of.
Yeah, but this is I was just everyone talk about Half-Life. I never saw Half-Life, and they everyone said okay, Quake is nice. So I wanted to try it out, and it looked nice. It was really interesting, but yeah. So now,
but it's really fast. So
yeah, but what you did then? So you started to write scripts for IRC chat, or what's your?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I did a lot of scripting for IRC, like just to set up the channel and make sure, because as we were getting popularity, our channel grew up with a lot of people, and so we had to moderate the crowd. I think at the peak attendance there was probably like 500 or 600 people, and yeah.
And why they joined your channel? Were just like fanboys or what?
Yeah, because I mean, at some point you get some kind of notoriety, so people that know you or that you played against, they just join just to get the latest news about where you're at, like who you're playing against, like things like this, right?
And you use the IRC channel for what? To communicate with the others during the game, or why you?
Yeah, it was basically the whole kind of community was based off of IRC. So you were doing everything on IRC, like talking to your friends, the gossip. You were also doing it on IRC, or searching for matches, you were doing it on IRC. Like that's it. Like there was no forum or nothing. Everybody was just on IRC just because that's where you had to be, it's like the underground of gaming back then was all happening in IRC. So you had to be there.
Okay. So
it's like the same thing as Twitter. When you follow somebody on Twitter, you follow that person to kind of see what they're saying.
Okay.
So back then you would go on a channel just to see what they're saying or what they're doing.
Okay. And I get that. And for management stuff, you wrote scripts which run on your machine, and you could, I don't know, kick out users or whatever, right? So you automated everything.
Right, exactly. I also I was writing bouncers back then. So bouncers were something you used to kind of connect a special bot while you were offline. This way, you could the bouncer was harvesting, like it was recording the logs and the private messages, and then when you were connecting back, it would give that back all to you. So then it's as if you were always connected.
It sounds almost like Matrix. What you're explaining right now is almost like a Matrix movie, these days. So for me,
yeah, kind of.
Feels like. And which language were the scripts? So it was like shell script, or what was it?
No, it was a special MIRC thing.
Okay.
That was not.
But there were already if-else for statements or loops or something like this already?
Yes, something like that. Yes.
Okay, nice.
So what's also interesting is my first use of Linux was we had an old computer in the guest room at home that I think it was an older computer of mine, and I didn't know what to do with it. And someday I remember like my dad bought some kind of computer magazine, and Mandriva, there was a CD-ROM for Mandriva on it. And I thought, oh hell, why not just? And I knew that the Half-Life and Counter-Strike servers were running best on Linux. So I thought, hey, maybe I could turn like this old computer into like a dedicated Counter-Strike server sitting upstairs at home, right? So I spent probably like a week trying to follow the tutorial for Mandriva. And so I installed it. And then I was trying to install Counter-Strike and the Half-Life dedicated server on it. And so I didn't know what I was doing because I back then I was more of a Windows user, and the command line and the Linux stuff, I had no idea how it worked. But I remember struggling with, there was a targz command on the tutorial I was following. And for some reason, the syntax was not the same in the Linux that I had. And it took me 2 days to figure out the options that I had to put right. Well, nevertheless, I managed to install the dedicated server at home, and there were a couple of people connecting to it. But what was fun is like our connection obviously didn't have a bandwidth big enough to host like a gaming server back then. So I remember my brother was playing on the server when there were people. And as soon as there was more like than 5 or 10 people, the CPU would go crazy. And then everybody had like 800 milliseconds of ping because the computer could not keep up with the players.
Yeah, probably I was on your server back then with my,
Yeah.
connected accidentally with your server. Okay. And why you had so many computers? Your dad was programmer?
No, I just a computer enthusiast, I guess.
Ah, nice. That is actually nice. So you got to know all the hardware, not for free, but at least, you felt the excitement, right? So it's okay, this is...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. To my friends that were coming home, it was like we had our own LAN center, kind of. So it's, I really enjoyed that when I was a teenager.
Okay.
The ability to bring my friend over and, hey, we can play these games for free, right? So let's stay here.
Cool.
Because otherwise you had to go to a LAN shop and then pay like 10 francs an hour. And then, we didn't have pocket money back then, so it was better to play at my place.
So when you started with programming then, but it was still not programming exactly. So you installed, the Counter-Strike server, but in one...
So I was still kind of doing HTML pages. So in fact, the fact that I had like a Counter-Strike team, we were thriving to get a website to kind of get like a a front page out there just to show, what we are doing and maybe like the awards we're getting and stuff. So I was always more or less like tinkering with HTML and JavaScript. I remember back then, so the Counter-Strike menu was really famous because it had some kind of animation. And I remade exactly the same menu with Flash. And I remember the font, the police for the Counter-Strike menu was freely available. So I was basically replicating the exact same menu in Flash, and I made like a first version of that, our website using that. I lost all this stuff. That's unfortunate. It's probably sitting in some attic in my parents' house in some old hard drive. I would love to find this kind of stuff someday, but I don't have that to show. That's too bad.
Yeah, this is always fun to see old stuff, what actually happened,
Yeah, and so that's all I was doing. I was doing a little bit of JavaScript, but yet I was not really understanding what I was doing. And in high school, I did like a scientific diploma.
Without scissors and glue, right? This time.
Yes. So math, physics, and there was like different kind of scientific diplomas, and one of them was more oriented toward like engineering. So we had what they called electrical engineering, and then the other one I forgot what mechanic engineering. And basically what I learned back then was like Boolean algebra and a couple of automations based on PLCs. I'm not sure if you know what that is. Graph stats. It's basically like some kind of visual language that you use to program automates.
Yeah,
like automate machines, like factory stuff.
Yeah, this is what I think I had to do something with it, with the PLC. But because
so the language we're using was called graph sets. It was like a graphical language.
Okay, graph sets, no, but PLC rings the bell because I was also interested in automation and robots in one point of time. So, one question is about your relation to computers. So all the years, you like the machines, or were computers just a way to play the games? So you know what I mean. So you're fascinated by the machine.
So during my teenage years, I was not really. So I didn't have that much money to get a good computer, because computers were evolving really fast, right? And for a teenager, it's not the same as somebody that works, because when you work, you can just spend your own money. When you're a teenager, you have to rely on your parents to pay this stuff.
Yeah.
So I remember I made a deal with my dad that if I would get my my high school degree, he would buy me a computer. And because my grades were not so good back then, because I was playing too much the game, if you know what I mean. So, so the deal was, okay, if you get your degree, then I will get you a computer. And so what I got was a Barebone. It's basically, it was a smaller box. And it basically came with a backpack. So the idea was that I could travel to these tournaments, because I didn't have a driving license. I could travel to these tournaments using the computer that could fit in a backpack. And I had a special monitor that was like 17 inches that was really lighter weight, that I could carry, with my hands. So I was able to kind of travel for the land competitions by train using that. And we kind of all had like smaller computers, because even if you were traveling with a car, let's say someone had a driving license, like having 5 computers, because you play this game with 5 people, right? Having 5 computers in a car, you can't do that. But if you have 5 smaller computers, then maybe things can fit. So that's why we all try to kind of get the smaller hardware. So my interest beyond that was there was not much. I was really I need a computer that works great for the game, and that's it.
You like tool, right? So you wanted to, because you wanted to play. Okay. So and
I was basically looking at a computer that would give me like 100 FPS, frames per second, without any loss of FPS. So if you're playing the game and suddenly like a lot of things is happening, and then your computer drops to like 20 FPS, and you die because of that, then maybe it's going to be like the one round where you lose the tournament, because your computer sucked at the time where you needed it not to suck, right? So I really needed a computer that was performant, so that I could play the game without having like second thoughts about it.
And how many FPS are critical? I mean, how much FPS, or how many frames you can lose?
So if you remember back then, the monitors, they were CRT monitors, right? And a good CRT monitor was the one with the flat screen, and that could give you 100 hertz.
Yes.
And so what you want as a computer is a computer that can consistently deliver 100 FPS per second to match the maximum frame rate of the computer, of the monitor. Sorry.
Yes, but if you have a FPS drop at 10 frames are dropping, this is probably
even so 2 to 3 to 5 frame drops per second is okay, but you can feel it in your hand with the mouse, probably like at 20 FPS.
Okay.
Because as you are moving the mouse to the screen, if the FPS drops, then the speed of the mouse is going to drop as well, right? Mm-hmm. Or the animation is not going to be as fluid. So you're definitely going to feel it. It might not impact you, but you're going to feel it.
And the gamers have special gear like mouses and keyboards. How critical is the hardware? Is it really
the keyboard is not important, and especially back then, I think the early hardware we got, like if you think of the old Microsoft keyboard, that keyboard was really good. It was really strong and it was mechanical.
Okay.
So, and it was freely available in any supermarket that was selling like computer stuff, right? Okay. So the keyboard was not so important. The mouse, however, what was important was that you needed a mouse with a good sensor. Mm-hmm. And because back then, if you were moving the mouse too fast, it would basically lose track of where you were at, and then your mouse would start blinking and go all over the place, right?
Okay.
So you needed a mouse that was basically able to like capture all the details of your trackpad without losing control of it.
Okay.
Even if you're going at high speed, because if you want to have let's say you want to do a reflex shot or whatever, because this guy is over there, and you want to make like a wrist movement super fast, right? You want that to work. If that doesn't work, then you're not happy about it. So there were basically again there was a couple of Microsoft mouses that would work really well. The Logitech mouses would work really well. So back then the gaming hardware was not really available, but there were certain things if you were buying them, they were working really well.
Okay.
So Logitech and Microsoft were basically known for that.
But nowadays, every mouse should work, right?
So yeah, nowadays good sensors are freely available, but I would say the problem these days is it depends what kind of game you're playing. So now it's all about the DPIs, right? Mm-hmm. If you play like a game which is like a real-time strategy game where you need to make like small movements and be really precise with it, you probably want something that has a high number of DPI in it.
Okay.
Like 1200, 2000 DPI, right?
Okay.
If you play a first-person shooter, what you want a lower sensitivity, and you want to kind of do bigger movements with your arm.
Okay.
Because you want to be able to have a repeatable movement so that you can learn muscle memory, right? Okay. So you kind of demultiply the sensitivity so that, let's say when you do like a 180-degree turn in the game, it's like one width of your trackpad, right? Of your mouse pad.
Yeah.
So for that, you want a lower DPI.
So it seems like you're still expert of gaming right now.
Yeah, it's like when you learn how to ride a bike, then you don't forget that's the same thing.
Sure. So
yeah, I'm still. So it's kind of funny. People were always kind of looking at me at work, like even at Oracle. I always have like a gaming kind of setup even when I work. So I have like a large mouse pad. I have like a nice mouse. And I also have something it's like a cable holder that's kind of putting my cable up so that it doesn't like drag behind the table.
Yeah. If you are programming, you have to also very fast. If you spot a bug, you have to move fast, kill the bug.
Yeah, even though I think I'm more of a Unix guy, I try to keep my hands on the keyboard. So I'm not using the mouse as much.
Yeah. The mouse is more like sculpture, so you just keep it, for some light. You could use it as a torch, a mouse, right? Okay, nice. So now you became expert in graph sets and PLC, and then this is what make you curious about computers?
Yeah. So in the last year of high school, there's this kind of special project that gives you 3 points for the diploma, for the exam. And you have to work on that project for like maybe 6 to 8 months, maybe like 6 hours a week or something. And so the project that we chose was we chose to like buy a cat door. It's something that you install in your door. So like you have to make a hole and you plug this special it's like a trap door, right? Yeah. And the principle of that trap door is that it was working with magnets.
Okay.
So that you put some kind of magnet on around the neck of your cat. Obviously, it's not something that would choke the cat, right? Just a little magnet.
Yeah.
And then it basically unlocks the door when the cat comes in.
Okay.
And what we were thinking was more like, we need to automate that so that no other cat can come in. So that so what we did was obviously it was some kind of like pseudo project because we were in high school. So we used SolidWorks because back then we also had lessons on how to kind of create 3D models with SolidWorks. I'm not sure if you know that software. It's like a CAD software.
Yeah. I heard about it because you said SolidWorks, and the company I think was Solid, and they did something else as well. They have to research because did they also created workstations?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I have to look it up because SolidWorks. I heard about was Cinema 4D and all the stuff. This is more familiar for me, but SolidWorks, I heard it, but never used that.
Right. So we were able to kind of make work on how we were gonna cut the trapdoor that we bought to modify it, right? And we're kind of projecting all the changes we're gonna make on that. So I kind of made all the SolidWorks models and work all the cuts we're gonna make. And then we used and that idea was funky because obviously we didn't have any we needed some kind of motor to kind of move the door.
Yeah.
Or remove some kind of lever that would block the door. And one teacher had this idea, which was like, oh, you should just like get a broken hard drive and get the thing in it, that moves the whatever the
head,
yeah, the heads, exactly. So that was a horrible idea, but nevertheless, that's what we did. And obviously, the last piece on this project was that we needed some kind of...
How many cats died?
We never tested it with a real cat. So we had to have some kind of electronics and programming to kind of control the whole thing. And so there was a little bit of kind of C programming going with it, where we had to kind of create a small board where we were connecting basically the motor and a little bit of program, like we had 2 buttons and the motor, basically something like this. And so I remember doing programming in C to kind of use masking, so bit masking, to kind of operate on the ports for the board and basically like trigger the motor.
But how it is possible? So your experience was HTML and Flash, and now you are forced...
Well, the teachers were basically guiding us and helping us along the way. So,
but it's a crazy jump, right? From Flash and HTML to C programming and controlling and hard disk, basically.
Yeah, well, the thing is, during these classes, we were already learning all the binary kind of algebra. So we knew what bit masking was and all these things, right? We just never really programmed with C or experienced like how you flash a card that can run like a microcontroller and do all these things, right? So, but the C part, basically the teacher kind of gave me a big skeleton, and I just had to do the masking part myself and figure out, how do I do the masking and the addressing so that I know which port it is and which value it should have and so on, right? There was a couple of LED that I had to light on also, so that was part of it. Basically what kind of got me into... That was my first experience with C programming, I think, yeah.
And you enjoyed the experience?
Yeah, kind of. I didn't really know what I was doing, obviously, but that was
amazing.
Nice.
So you were 18 back then, 19, something like this?
Yeah.
Okay, what happened afterwards?
Well, afterwards, you got to get out of high school and get into college, right?
And so, when you decided to study computer science?
Yeah, obviously. That was the obvious choice for me, right?
Yeah, I don't know. So the project, you were forced to use C to program the hard disk. This was actually what made the decision, to go to the college, or you knew it before?
Oh, no, because since I was already into like tinkering like with computers at home and HTML and Flash and all these things, I was enjoying using computers, right? So for me, when I thought about what I want to do, it's like this was really obvious. My grades were not as good though, so I knew that I had to pick carefully which place I wanted to go to so that I could get accepted. I applied to the wrong colleges the first year, and I didn't get what I wanted. So I ended up in a place which was doing both electrical engineering and a little bit of computer science.
Oh, this is hard.
Yeah, and I really didn't like the electronic classes and all this stuff. This wasn't for me. So, but they had a lot of teaching for Boolean algebra, and obviously it's college. So now when you're learning this stuff, like they go really, really hard. And I remember I was really good at this. I ended up dropping out from that college after like 6 months. And I made a deal with my parents where it's like, okay, you can basically have a free year, but you got to make sure that next year you are, into a proper college, and then you stay over there. So that's what we did. And obviously, and it's like back then I was really good also at Counter-Strike, so I had to basically kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And I used that year to kind of do a lot of tournaments with our team, which is probably also one of the reasons I dropped out. But let's not say that.
Okay, this was like a strategic decision. And
yeah,
you won something reasonable with Counter-Strike, or?
Yeah, we won probably like 6 or 7 tournaments that year. We didn't end up going to the national tournaments because there was a rule, and then somehow we got like removed points. That was kind of shady. But we were supposed to go, but at the end we didn't go because we broke the rules somehow. Okay. Like that was not very clear. Okay. We were really disappointed about that because that's what we were going
probably
to do.
You used a mouse with too much DPI or something like this. Right?
No, it's because one of our players played with another team, and then he basically transferred to our team, and there was a rule that you have to respect like some kind of quiet period between the transfers, which he did, but he did not officialize the transfer on time. So if you looked at the dates, between the transfer, there was not enough time. But if you looked at the dates between the last time he played for the previous team and the next team, like there was a lot of, the rule was respected. And I think we were fine, except that at the end, a lot of people kind of cheated the rules, and they had to do a cleanup. And we ended up being part of that cleanup. So that was unfortunate for us.
Oh, okay. So then you started at a proper college with more software and less technical engineering, I guess. And
and the nice part about that is the first college was in my hometown, and the second college that I went to the second year was in a different town. Okay. So I had to move out of the parents' house, which was also very nice.
Okay.
Yeah, so I spent 2 years in a different city and in a computer science only degree.
And you enjoyed the experience then you at the
Oh yeah, very much, yeah.
And you still played a lot, or you just focus on programming?
Oh, you're talking about the game. Oh, sorry. So let's say I was playing. No, I think it's probably around that time that I stopped really playing. I still play like for fun, but I'm not looking at playing competitively anymore.
Sure. But back then, what you did at the university, which programming language you learned back then, and which project you had? No, noticeable projects.
They made a start with it was C++, but what they did is, since the syntax of C++ is rather hardcore, they made some kind of library that would provide some abstraction suitable for learning. So that you didn't have like all these fancy English keywords. I would say, looking back on this today, I don't think it was right, because programming is all written in English. So trying to fit a French-style programming language based off of C++ doesn't make much sense to me, because that's what they were doing. All these kids don't speak English very well, so let's teach them the principle of programming using this kind of C++ library that provides like a DSL in French, right?
Yeah.
And so that's how we learned like the for loops and all these concepts, right? But I don't think it was right.
Was it university?
Yeah, that was university, yes.
But it's strange, because at high school you did C, hardcore C. At the university you got modified C++, to use.
Right, French. They have to accommodate everybody's background. They don't know that people have experience in it, so they have to basically start from scratch.
Okay.
And I also remember the classes were really boring in the beginning, because they started basically teaching us. The first class we got was grammar.
Okay.
They were explaining us what a grammar is, using like forgot the syntax you have for grammar, but the
Bacchus-Naur form and stuff
exactly.
This is okay, but this is normal in computer science. You have to do it. The grammar.
It was so boring. I remember nobody was following that.
Information theory and Chomsky and stuff like that, right? Exactly.
So we learned basically C++ using this weird library, and then we switched maybe after a couple of months to like real C++. So they were gradually telling us to stop using the special library in the projects. And I think eventually you had to not use the library to get your grades.
Okay.
Let's see. So we did a lot of... we had networking classes back there where we're using like Wireshark to kind of on special lab machines. We did a lot of Boolean algebra, obviously. We did a lot of assembler, which I really loved. I was so good at assembler that I was kind of helping the whole class with assembler because I really was able to understand it.
Motorola,
they were
right?
using some kind
68,000 assembler, right? Motorola.
No, this was a weird emulator.
Okay.
And so we were just writing assembler in this kind of weird emulator. Yeah, I just remember that I enjoyed it really, really a lot. The exam at the end was to print happy birthday. Basically, you had to write like 150 lines of assembler to print happy birthday. That was funny.
Okay. And when you learn Java, so what is between the C++ and Java? So what was,
Interesting. So my first experience with Java was also over there, but I didn't like it. Because back there, I really got into like Linux and Unix and how beautiful it is to kind of use all these toolings to write like C and C++. You have the make files and like everything was just natural, right? Mm-hmm. Also, the teacher at our schools, they had Emacs set up rather nicely. So the Emacs setup to write C and C++ was really great. I mean, that was great. In fact, I never was able to reproduce the same Emacs environment in my own computer because the teachers, what they had a lot of macros and stuff. Like that was really great. But when we were writing Java, you had to create all these directories to create the package structure. And like everything was so weird compared to the C tools that I remember not liking it.
And you learned Java at university, right?
Yes.
Okay. And which Java was it? JDK 1.3 for probably 1.3, 1.4?
Something like this, yeah. Because I was over there in 2006, so whatever version of Java was available at that time.
Okay. So you did some Java project at university. What you created with Java, you remember?
Let's see. No, I can't remember. I just remember being ashamed that I had a big problem once. I think we were writing like client server apps, that kind of stuff, because the teacher was trying to teach us like fundamentals, right? So we were writing like a client server app in C, and then we had to do the same in Java just to see the differences. I think we got a little bit of servlet hands-on at some point also. Anyway, so I remember being ashamed because I had a problem that I was stuck on for like maybe an hour, and I had this stack trace, and I called the teacher. And the teacher looked at my screen and had a stack trace, and he tells me about the stack trace tells you what your error is, and he makes me read the stack trace, and then I realized my problem is I'm reading the stack trace. I was so ashamed. Like I was blocked for an hour, and to the point where I go grab a teacher from his office back to my computer to unblock me, and then I just had to read the stack trace. So I was really ashamed by that.
Okay. You still remember that? This was like a key experience at the university.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's And so let's see. So I didn't do a full school where you spend 5 years at the same place.
Okay.
It was not like an engineering school that delivers a diploma at the end of 5 years. What I did was a 2 years diploma that was inside a school that was attached to the university, right? Okay. And then using that, you could go and apply for a bachelor. You could go back into the regular mainstream university into a bachelor, right? The very good things about that school is that it's condensed and it's really hard. So it's like you have a lot of classes, and the teachers are really verifying that you're understanding the knowledge a lot. So you are under control. At the university in France, it's like a free mode. The teachers don't really care if you come or if you're following the classes.
Okay.
And then you don't get grades every day. You just get grades like every 6 months, every semester, right?
Okay.
I would say most of the knowledge I have today, the fundamentals, are from that school.
Okay.
So, which is really great. Anyway, so after that, I was able to get back into a bachelor degree into a different city, and then a master at university. So I did like 3 more years into a different university to kind of get a master's degree.
Okay. And was your master work about Java, with Java?
Yeah, obviously we worked a lot with Java. But the problem is when you go to university like this, again, they have to kind of accommodate people from different backgrounds.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was coming from a very specialized background, so I had a lot of the fundamentals. But the people that started over there from year 1 at the university, they didn't do any programming, for instance.
Yes.
So I spent basically my 3rd year not doing much because all these people were very late compared to us. They didn't have any Boolean algebra knowledge or even any hands-on with Linux or Java. So the teachers were basically kind of telling all the people that were coming from these schools like mine to kind of go and do something else while they were trying to
play a bit Counter-Strike.
Not really. We had special exercises, but they were one thing that I remember really well is this first experience at school with C-system hands-on. I remember that that was insane to me. So we come to the class, and the teacher is sitting behind his desk. He hands you a piece of paper and then doesn't say anything. So you go behind the computer and then you look at the paper. And I remember reading all the exercises and they were really concise, like maybe 2 lines. And they're like, using standard C routine, write a program that lists the files in a directory. And I'm like, that's nice. That's interesting. I think I know I can do that. And, trying to scramble in my head, like all my previous knowledge about what I was doing in the previous school. And then I raised my hand. I'm like, I don't think anyone else in this class knows what these 2 lines mean. Yeah. And then I remember turning around and everybody had their eyes wide open, like, what is this? Yeah. And the teacher did not care. Unless you were asking him a question, he would not care. So that's what really kind of bothered me about this style of teaching, which is like, well, you figure it out on your own.
Yeah, it's not teaching. So it's like, I don't know.
Yeah. So it really
paper. Yeah.
Exactly. That this guy was a researcher and was not much of a teacher. But anyway, I rather enjoy this kind of hardcore system classes. I really like this stuff.
What you did reasonable with Java at university or after university? One point of time you became Java developer, right?
Yes. So let's see. So we had a project where we had to do web services.
Okay.
I remember we using SOAP clients, and I used I think it's called Axis 2.
Yeah,
from Apache.
Yes.
And so what's really funny is like back then we had the first experience with Maven. I think it was Maven 1.
Oh.
And I hated it. I mean, that was really, really bad. And so I was still kind of writing Java with Emacs and building my code with makefiles because I was rather thinking like Java sucks and C is better. So I was using the tools I knew. And I remember spending so much time trying to get a jar file that only contained basically a fat jar that only contained the classes that I needed. And the reason for that is that we had to upload the final code of the project onto some kind of page, and they had a max payload size of 100 megs.
Okay.
And if obviously you were using Eclipse or something like this and you were shipping all the dependencies from Axis and everything in your project, you were way beyond 100 megs.
Yes.
And so I remember spending maybe like 2 days scripting the hell out of my project, trying to remove every classes that was not referenced.
Okay.
Like doing it the hard way just to like, God, I need to ship my project. I can't ship it because I cannot upload it. So let's just trim everything that, is not needed. So obviously what I was doing is a loop where I just try to run the project, class not found. Okay, add that class, right? Like really the wrong way of doing this.
Yeah.
And we ended up shipping the project in like 20 megs and I was really proud of it. And we shipped like a makefile and everything worked great. And I remember with the teammate I had like to my binoma to do that project. We're really proud of this.
Yeah, this is and then, nowadays you will sell it as tree shaking. This is what.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the greatest stuff ever.
Exactly. And then I remember talking about the project afterwards with some of my classmates. And one guy said, well, I just shipped my entire Eclipse workspace to the teacher. And I was like, how did you do that? Like, you could not upload this, right? He said, oh, I just sent him an email and he told me to like put the file over there. And I was so disappointed. And then what we didn't know is like the teacher was using Windows. So he said that he wasn't able to build our project with our marvelous makefile, and he had to basically make an Eclipse project for it. Okay. So we got it all wrong, and I was really pissed that that I spent all this time basically for nothing, and we did not even get extra points for fitting the max payload size of the upload page.
Yeah. So you were not very lucky with Java at the university, it seems like, right?
Yeah. And so what really got me into Java, it's actually very funny. It's so at school usually in France you have to, whenever you have a diploma, they want you to do an internship with a company to validate your degree, right? So I had done an internship at the end of the first 2 years. I had done an internship at the end of the third year of bachelor, but most of these things were not Java. And for the master's degree, I was looking for something big because what you know is that since you are graduating, that you're probably going to establish a relationship between you and the company and they can offer you a job, right? So it's really important to find a good project. So I ended up being really lucky and I found a project with a company called Surly. And I remember the project was implement JASPIC in the JONAS application server or something. I had to implement, like the project they put out there was implement a security spec from JavaE on the JONAS application server. And so I interviewed with Surly and I got in, except that they had multiple students basically coming in, and they shuffled the projects around, and then at the end I didn't get that project. So I was a little bit, because the project I applied for and I chose this company for wasn't the project that I ended up getting. Mm-hmm. So I was slightly, in the first few days, but that was for the better, because I ended up working on GlassFish on a different project that was application versioning. Mm-hmm. So Surly was willing to kind of make a name for themselves and gain kind of like publicity by using these cheap interns, work on great projects, and at the same time kind of like make them grind their teeth on good code, right? And then gain experience from that. So that was like a win-win for everybody. Yeah. And so I ended up working with the people at Surly under like supervision from like Surly engineers on the versioning feature in GlassFish. Mm-hmm. And for me, that was a huge leap, because I was not such a Java developer, and I hated Java because it was always hard to kind of set up the IDE and get your dependencies right and all these things. But because of Surly, I got basically exposed to Maven 2, NetBeans, and Subversion back then. So I had to learn all these technologies in basically like in 2 weeks, and I suddenly saw the good side of Java. I was like, wow, this is really nice, and now I understand how powerful this stuff can be. So I ended up basically being a Maven fanboy and a NetBeans fanboy because of that, because that basically what kind of brought me back to Java.
And what you did at Surly was like, how to call it, rolling updates basically with GlassFish, right?
Yes. So what we did was a spec for the deployment subsystem, where you would encode versioning into a name that had a special semantics. So then you would separate the version with a colon, and then you could use like on special commands like enable or disable, you could use like wildcards. And then if you combine all these smaller features of the versioning kind of system, you could do rolling upgrades. Mm-hmm. You could basically kind of configure your load balancer and say, disable the current active version and then enable the next version, right? And then we had stuff around that the enabled version would not basically, we would not break, we would not do a hard deployment, so that basically you would do like quieting, where your load balancer was helping you transition between the versions. Like old users were still using the old application, and new users were directed toward the new application, right? So if you combine all these features together, you get something like rolling upgrade.
Why Surly did it? You know that?
That's a good question. I think because the people at Surly were in touch with a French guy that was working on GlassFish back then, Alexis Moussin-Pushkin.
Exactly.
He was the evangelist of GlassFish. Mm-hmm. And I think he had good relationship with the people at Surly. Okay. And so through that relationship, they were looking at making contributions to GlassFish with interns.
Yeah. And what I remember from Surly and GlassFish, exactly this feature, because it was announced at JavaONE. So the rolling updates with GlassFish contributed by Surly, so they made it open source or somehow contributed back to GlassFish. And Alexis was the GlassFish evangelist. I think even this was Sun Microsystems still. And it was announced at JavaONE.
It was right at the transition. So yeah. I remember when it was in December 2009, the first email exchanges we had with the Sun engineers. Mm-hmm. And then around February 2010, their email changed from sun.com to oracle.com.
Okay. And you stayed at Surly? Right at the transition. So you became a Surly employee?
No. So what I did was I basically was kind of willing to. So somebody in Surly planted a bug in me and said, Romain, you're young, you should use this opportunity to kind of travel abroad and work in a foreign company and kind of learn English so that you can come back to France someday and have a great experience from that. Because he said he did the same when he went to Australia for a couple of years, and he said that was really a good experience for him. So he told me, I think you should go abroad and do something like this. So it planted the bug in me, and after a while I was like, okay, I'm convinced I need to go abroad and work for a couple of years and then maybe come back. Mm-hmm. So I asked the people at Surly to put me in touch with Alexi so that I could basically try to get a job at Oracle.
Okay. And it worked out.
So I never really worked at Surly.
Okay. So so you work immediately for Oracle for GlassFish?
Well, then I basically interviewed for GlassFish at Oracle. A couple of projects, actually. I did interview for Jersey and other projects. And it was really hard. But anyway, I got at Oracle. And then it took me almost about a year to get started with a job over there. I don't know why it takes so long to start a job at Oracle. Okay. But from the time I started interviewing and the time I actually had my first day, it was almost a year.
Okay. And what you did in the year? Played Counter-Strike?
Not really, because if you think about it, like my parents had their son graduate for a master's degree.
Yeah.
He did not get a job he was offered to, and instead tried to pursue like a pseudo opportunity with an American company, right? And then for like 6 or 7 months, people are not answering.
Yeah.
And so my parents are like, what are you going to do with your life? Like, you need to do something. Yeah. So I was actually doing job interviews on the side as a backup in case, this stuff was going nowhere.
Okay.
And I was being really stressed because then you have to explain when you're doing interviews why you're not working. Mm-hmm. And it's like you have a gap of a year and people are asking, say, so what did you do for that time? It's also hard to explain people that you're doing a job interview as a backup. Yeah. It's people don't really like being treated as a second as a second choice, right? So that was not a great experience.
But then Oracle said
also,
yes.
that convinced me that I didn't want to work in France. Like all the style of interviews that I had in France, I didn't like it.
Okay.
This integrator/services company, I really don't like the way they operate. And instead, the laid-back version of this kind of American companies was much better for me because they're not really looking at making you like solve logical tests and grade you on like how you solve a specific puzzle that has nothing to do with programming, right? Instead, they ask you like hands-on experience, and maybe they say like, okay, like solve this binary tree or render this or that, and they give you like specific coding exercises rather than pseudo puzzle games, which was weird.
But you got accepted at Oracle, right, back then?
So yeah. And so my first choice was I asked to go to the US. And the problem, so I was in touch with somebody from the JDK for a potential job in the JDK group. Mm-hmm. The problem is like that manager didn't hire anybody since they were acquired by Oracle. So he didn't know the policies to kind of bring a fresh grad over as a first job.
Okay.
And after a while, basically, he told me like it's not possible because Oracle doesn't have such policies. Mm-hmm. He said at Sun they were able to do it, but at Oracle, like the policies are that you cannot bring a fresh grad over like that. Mm-hmm. So I was told that I had to go to Prague first.
Okay.
And that I could get a job in Prague. So I ended up going to Prague and working there.
Okay.
So I got I got a second set of interviews for the GlassFish group where they had positions available in Prague.
Okay. And you worked then for GlassFish subsystem, or for which subsystem you worked?
I worked, so that was weird because there was nobody in Prague that really worked on the GlassFish team. They worked on Metro and Jersey and all these sub-projects, but nobody worked on, that was like also the people working on Grizzly were there, but nobody, or Jaxby, but nobody worked on the app server itself. Mm-hmm. So I ended up basically being the only GlassFish team member in Prague, even though we were all GlassFish, right? Because it was the same kind of bigger project. But that worked out great because all these people were great engineers. I learned a lot from them. And I also ended up being kind of like the point of contact for GlassFish to them.
Yeah. And what you did, what was what you had to implement with GlassFish back then? Do you remember?
So in GlassFish, I was more doing of the build. So I was responsible for, I was not really responsible for anything directly. I was more like solving everyday's problem related to like the build, the OSGI, madness,
H2K stuff, right? The
HK2, yeah, I obviously, because HK2 was integrated with OSGI, I had to also work a little bit with that. I did a lot of work around the installer and the packager, which they were kind of weird projects anyway. And then I ended up specializing in Maven because GlassFish was such a big project. And people were so kind of obscure to Maven, or Maven was obscure to them. Nobody really had control on the GlassFish build itself. Mm-hmm. And I remember like they had problems running with Maven 3. They could not transition over from Maven 2 to Maven 3. Mm-hmm. And like the first week I worked there, I solved the problem when I was basically fixing a plugin that didn't have the right annotations or whatever. And I made it work with Maven 3. And people were like, oh, great, somebody understands this stuff. And that's kind of how I basically got my specialization in the team, where I'm the one that can solve the Maven problems.
So you became the chief hacker again, right?
Yeah, you could say so.
without the knowledge of marquee tags, still, this is remarkable.
Yeah. No marquee guru. So let's see. I did that. I ended up working a lot in terms of enabling the people, the spec leads that were responsible for publishing their Maven artifacts for the API jars. Mm-hmm. Because back then, in my opinion, it was really a mess the way the GlassFish projects were publishing their API jars. The POMs were messed up and a lot of things were wrong. And Bill Shannon he wanted all of this stuff to kind of be aligned and be like kind of consistent across all APIs, not have like different conventions from one API to the other. And so it all started because the JavaE 6 API jar, if you remember, there's this I mean, obviously, you know that there is this one API jar that you can use to compile against all the set of APIs from JavaE. It's the API, the jar that goes like JavaX : JavaX - JavaE API, something like this, right? And the ones from the version 6 had a problem in it because they stripped the code from the classes in it.
This was not a problem, it was a feature. What Bill did, he removed the
Yeah, it wasn't Bill, it was the other spec lead. I forgot his name.
Okay.
Oh, the guy that went to Google afterwards.
This is what I didn't know. I think it was Bill, because there are lots of conversation with Bill, and Bill said, yeah, it's actually correct. You shouldn't use that, you know? It's like, yeah, but if we write unit tests and we mock out the stuff, it just breaks our compilation process.
Basically, if you have this stuff in your runtime class pass error, then it just blows up, and that's wrong, right?
Yeah.
So nevertheless, I remember that actually the way they did that stripping was really smart. They were using an annotation processor and they were just running it Java C with an annotation processor, and they were stripping all the bytecode. I remember looking at this and I was like, wow, that's really a smart use of that. Anyway, so what I did as kind of like my first kind of acknowledgement work on GlassFish was make this stuff right. So I ended up kind of redoing all the API jar projects from JavaE and kind of telling people how they should build their stuff. And Bill had these kind of special conventions for the metadata in the API jars. Like the group ID naming should be a certain way. So he wrote some conventions. And these conventions were like the manifest metadata had to have special things in it, and they should follow a certain convention. The group ID should follow a convention that was matching the package name and so on, right? The OSGI bundle name and all these things were supposed to like follow a certain set of conventions. So he wrote this big document back then. And the problem is people tried to follow that document, but basically nobody was able to like follow it consistently because it was hard basically to not make any mistakes. So what I did is I wrote a couple of plugins to kind of automate this stuff. And I made all the APIs basically implement Bill's convention like consistently, right? And I was able to kind of make this API jar, which you saw from version 7, with all the Java docs. And so that's the first kind of recognizable thing that I did with the GlassFish project is I kind of redid all the Mavenization of the Java APIs, the individual specs and the aggregated API jar. And by the way, the work that I did by then, you could still see it now in the new Jakarta API project. We donated that and Bill worked on that, but it's based off of the work that I did back then.
We are a little bit over time. So what I would like to do is to split this apart and then go deeply, repeating from there, from starting with Jakarta E6 and then to, some CLI magic you're doing right now. So just as cliffhanger. So until then, where people can find you on the internet, or do you have some, some links or handles or whatever, how people can find you? So
I have a Twitter handle, even though I don't use it much.
Okay.
It's rGrecourt, GRECOURT, I think. But I don't use it much. I would recommend people just find me on GitHub. And I don't even know if you can do a private message on GitHub. Can you? I don't think so.
Never tried that.
Let's see. I think the best, if they want to find me, is to actually go on the Helidon Slack channel.
Helidon Slack channel, okay.
Yeah, and then they would find me with my handle, rGrecourt.
rGrecourt, perfect.
Yeah.
So thank you. It was lots of fun, and I would like to reinvite you back and speak a little bit more about Helidon.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Thank you. Bye.